Ask anyone why Napoleon and Hitler failed to conquer Russia, and you'll likely hear the same answer. Their armies were swallowed whole by the brutal, freezing Russian winter. The historical record tells a different story. By August of 1812, months before the first snowfall, Napoleon had already lost 100,000 men. By November of 1941, the German logistical network had already reached a state of total collapse. The dying happened in the dirt, long before the deep snow ever arrived. This map shows the real killer of both empires, a 1,000-kilometer stretch of empty, hostile geography sitting between the European border and the capital city of Moscow. Facing this massive distance, planners for both invasions built their entire supply strategies around a very specific assumption: a decisive victory within 3 weeks. They calculated they would cross the border, force the enemy into a massive fight, win, and immediately force a surrender. That the defenders simply refused to give them that battle. The Russian armies continuously retreated backward into the endless expanse of their own empire. By walking backward, the retreating forces weaponized their own geography. Every mile they surrendered forced the invaders to stretch their supply lines thinner, turning a tactical advance into a mathematical death sentence. Napoleon prepared extensively for this. In 1812, he expanded his supply train to 26 dedicated battalions, relying on thousands of heavy transport wagons to carry provisions for his men. Then came the Rasputitsa, the notorious season of heavy rain. The dirt tracks spanning the Russian countryside quickly dissolved into deep, sticky bogs. Marching through this mud slashed the speed of the transport wagons to a crawl. This created a fatal paradox for 19th century military logistics. Napoleon brought roughly 250,000 horses to haul his supplies and artillery, but horses are living engines. They require massive, constant inputs of fuel in the form of fodder and oats. This chart shows the wagon's payload. A massive percentage was just food for the horses. Because mud slowed the wagons, the journey took days longer. Out on the trail, horses kept eating, eventually consuming their own cargo before reaching the front, leaving zero food. The supply chain literally cannibalized itself. The math of the 1812 campaign meant that every additional mile of mud forced the horses to consume the very rations they were hauling, leaving the army to starve at the end of a functional trail. 130 years later, Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa. By 1941, the German Blitzkrieg carried a terrifying reputation as an unstoppable motorized juggernaut that would easily outpace the mistakes of the 19th century. That mechanization, however, was largely a myth. The bulk of the German military in 1941 was still heavily reliant on horses to move its artillery and supplies. They also encountered a massive infrastructural roadblock, the 89mm War. This diagram illustrates a critical engineering discrepancy. Soviet railway tracks were built slightly wider than standard European tracks. The moment German supply trains crossed the border, they were completely useless. To bridge the gap from the railheads to the front lines, the German army had to deploy fleets of motorized transport trucks, known as lorries. They drove them straight into the exact same muddy bogs that had swallowed Napoleon's wagons. Pushing a heavy truck through thick, sinking mud forces the engine into overdrive. Because of the ruined roads, German trucks were burning roughly 30% more fuel than planners had initially calculated. This flowchart maps the trap. To deliver that extra fuel to starving units, command dispatched more trucks. But those extra trucks drove over the same muddy roads, meaning they burned even more fuel just to transport the fuel. Despite a century of technological leaps, the math remained exactly the same. The Germans had merely traded Napoleon's horse fodder paradox for a motorized fuel paradox. The darkest detail of both invasions is that the quartermasters and logisticians ran these calculations before a single shot was fired. They knew the math didn't add up, but the logistics were subjected to a political override. Both Napoleon and Hitler convinced themselves that sheer force of will and military superiority could somehow bend the strict laws of distance and consumption. By the time Napoleon walked into a burning Moscow, his army had evaporated. Capturing the capital meant absolutely nothing, because the arterial network required to keep his men alive had already flatlined hundreds of miles behind him. Decades later, German troops pushed to the very outskirts of Moscow, but their engines were dead, their fuel lines were severed, and their offensive momentum had starved to death in the mud. Logistics dictate the boundaries of the possible. Advanced weaponry and political willpower ultimately surrender to the rigid physics of distance and consumption. History blames the freezing cold, but the arithmetic of the march had already executed these empires long before the snow arrived.